Canada's holding up for potash and for oil. They have some rare earth minerals, but we discovered not too long ago, I think in Tennessee, a lot of rare earth minerals or something like that. Tennessee or another state. But I do think, like, trade wise, like, it makes more sense to go with Russia than it would be to try to, like, keep up with Canada. No, you're wrong. I got nothing against Canada. I just think that, like, they're a dependent of ours, just like everything else. Like they get way more out of the deal than we get out of the deal. Is how I'm looking at it. So if we don't, but my biggest stay is that, like, if we don't work shit out with Russia, like, somebody's gonna, I mean, somebody's going to. They are looking for friends. We need to try to find a way to make that happen, and, like, that keeps them at least close. You know what I mean? Like, we then at least know what the fuck's going on. And very frankly, just as Mark said, Putin's being very, 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 like, pussyfooted about this. He really, shockingly so, because he could have fucked up Ukraine really hard, really fast, and kept it going. And I mean, I have clients in a lot of these places that are in Ukraine, or I used to. I don't have it there anymore, but they all want to be Russian. Like, they identify as Russian. Like, a lot of these people. So I understand where people, like, it's the same thing as, like, the social contagion we were talking about earlier. America mostly is made up of, room temperature IQ people. We don't pride ourselves in being a very intelligent country. We pride ourselves in doing stupid shit. Like, other countries have their kids, building robots. Our kids are trying to see how many Twinkies they can fit in their mouth. Big difference. I just think that we as a country need to start really thinking, like, okay, we can't just be told who to hate. Like, people need to ask questions, because that's what it is right now. That's why they hate Jewish people. I have not yet heard. You guys are Jewish and weren't able to give it to me. I have not yet heard from anybody that hates Jewish people why they hate Jewish people, besides being Jewish.
Our answers were pretty bad. Like, there wasn't one reason. Like, I mean, they were good, but it doesn't make sense.
But that's exactly the answer.
Yes,
that's exactly the answer, which is that it doesn't make sense. And like, once you're kind of comfortable admitting that it doesn't make sense, that not everything has to make sense in terms of this, then it's like, oh, okay, that's a little liberating. I mean, what makes me I think, like, just going back to that for a second, and stepping away from Russia, which I would love to get back to, but, like, I don't think anti-Semitism is a form of racism. I think that when people say that, they're trying to fit a round peg into a square hole, and they just they make a lot of important mistakes that have consequences. I think essentially anti-Semitism is a way of looking at the world that frankly is like objectively wrong. It's an obsession with Jews based on things that are objectively wrong. Like, I mean, I don't really care if someone is like, oh, I hate Jews because they're greedy, or because they're clannish, or because blah, 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 all these other reasons. Like, people can say the same thing about any other group. Every group has stereotypical things that are negative attributes or whatever. And it's like, that's fine. Nobody gives a shit. But what we see with Jews that we don't see with other people is this obsessive monomaniacal thing about, like, the Jews controlling everything, the Jews being behind everything. And, like, they could release, every JFK file that there is. And if there's one document that says Israel, it's like, that's all they're going to fixate on, because they knew what they were going to do before they released the document. And
I agree with that.
So, like, that's not garden variety. That's not like hate. That's not like, whatever. I don't like blacks because X, Y, or Z, or I don't like Mexicans or white people, or, whatever. It's a totally metaphysical kind of thing that takes over your life. And I mean, have you ever met a serious anti-Semite who is, like, normal? It rots your brain.
No.
Like, you can't think about anything else. You start going off. And I think that we're in a very, very bad time because look, you had COVID, you had the 2020 election, you had all this stuff, and it trained people into thinking conspiratorially. And just because the the media and many of our institutions can't be trusted, it doesn't mean that our entire system of evaluating fact and fiction gets thrown out the window. And that's exactly what happened. So it's like, I remember in December 2020, after the election, is when I started to have people come to me. When you had all these bullshit theories about like the what do you call it? Voting machines, from Venezuela and this and that, and just like really crazy kind of nonsense about the election. I would say, no, that's not true because X, Y, and Z. And then someone would say, prove it didn't happen. And that's when I'm like, I'm not going to win with these people because you can't prove something didn't happen. And if that's now your standard, and that's really become the standard, like you say, Israel didn't kill JFK, and they're like, prove it. And you're in a box because nothing makes sense anymore because like reality is just, it's just whatever, totally up for grabs. And it pisses me off as a right winger because for the last, 30 years, I've been screaming about how the left sucks because the left got away with the concept of truth and objective reality. And it's like, okay, well, this is my story. This is my truth. And now it's like, well, truth doesn't matter because, we've already figured out who the bad guy is at the end of the story. And it doesn't even matter what details there are. We just, we throw them in. And if you don't like those, we'll come up with other ones. But, the bottom line of the story is that it's the Jews. And like, that's a kind of weird, fucked up thing that, shit, I hope I can say that.
No, you can't.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
that's a really crazy thing because it takes this into the world of like nonsense and nothing where like truth doesn't matter. And I remember the COVID days, like we were all screaming about this stuff and the kind of institutional corruption during the COVID days. But when we were screaming about that, it was like, no, CDC and these institutions and the New York Times, whatever, they are lying because this is the truth. Well, if you take away the idea of what is true, you can't even make that argument anymore.
Yeah.
And that's where we are.
Well, it ushered in the topic of misinformation. Misinformation is like being like, so Dave, you're spreading misinformation. Your chances of proving that are also your same chances of proving to me you're not on steroids, right? Like it's the same argument. Like people will always be like, oh, you're on steroids. Like even if you're not, you can't prove you're not. Like because you can you can literally like film yourself pissing in a cup, taking it to the fucking thing, like everything, and people won't believe it. It's the same thing though. Like I'm not speaking misinformation. Here are my facts. Well, I don't believe those facts. I believe these facts from the CDC. Back then, it was like that. Like, I could use CDC. I would use CDC data to show people like, here's how this data could actually be interpreted. This is why blah blah ABC, right? And they're like, no, like it's just like this. What you're saying, it's like this, suspension of reality, basically for the sake of their feelings, their thoughts, right?